Okay. So this week, and I know in my experience with the Course in Miracles, I started getting a lot different dreams when I started, very symbolic dreams and just messages, thoughts that I'd get in my head that I'd look up and say, "Oh wow, I didn't know what that was, but that means a lot to me." Anyway, we're reading chapter 2, the first section of chapter 2, which is called "The Origins of Separation." So I will just actually let me pop the link into the chat in case anybody would like to read along with us. And if you have a book, even better. Well, it's just, I don't know if it's better. It's just.
It's always nice to hold a book.
I know, that's how I feel. But this is the link to the section that we're reading. And hello, Paul. It looks like you're not muted. So nice for you to be here.
Yeah, I unmuted. I
Nice.
didn't realize I was muted.
So I'm not sure if you've been here before, but the way that it seems to work is that I'll read one section, and then we'll see how our discussion takes off from there. So this is chapter 2, section 1, The Origins of Separation. To extend is a fundamental aspect of God, which he gave to his son. And I just have to make a note before we dig any further. A Course in Miracles uses these pronouns he and his and son, but it just uses that because of convention, and that's the way that, these talks tend to be spoken. It has nothing to do with gender. It's just that's what it chooses to use. It could just as easily be her and her daughter, but this is just what it chooses to use. So in the creation, God extended himself to his creations and imbued them with the same loving will to create. You have not only been fully created, but have also been created perfect. There is no emptiness in you. Because of your likeness to your Creator, you are creative. No child of God can lose this ability because it is inherent in what he is, but he can use it inappropriately by projecting. The inappropriate use of extension, or projection, occurs when you believe that some emptiness or lack exists in you, and that you can fill it with your own ideas instead of truth. This process involves the following steps. First, you believe that what God created can be changed by your own mind. Second, you believe that what is perfect can be rendered imperfect or lacking. Third, you believe that you can distort the creations of God, including yourself. Fourth, you believe that you can create yourself, and that the direction of your own creation is up to you. These related distortions represent a picture of what actually occurred in the separation, or the detour into fear. None of this existed before the separation, nor does it actually exist now. Everything God created is like him. Extension, as undertaken by God, is similar to the inner radiance that the children of the Father inherit from him. Its real source is internal. This is as true of the Son as of the Father. In this sense, the creation includes both the creation of the Son by God and the Son's creation when his mind is healed. This requires God's endowment of the Son with free will, because all loving creation is freely given in one continuous line, in which all aspects are of the same order. The Garden of Eden, or the pre-separation condition, was a state of mind in which nothing was needed. When Adam listened to the lies of the serpent, all he heard was untruth. You do not have to continue to believe what is not true unless you choose to do so. All that can literally disappear in the twinkling of an eye because it is merely a misperception. What is seen in dreams seems to be very real, yet the Bible says that a deep sleep fell upon Adam, and nowhere is there reference to his waking up. The world has not yet experienced any comprehensive reawakening or rebirth. Such a rebirth is impossible as long as you continue to project or miscreate. It still remains within you, however, to extend as God extended his spirit to you. In reality, this is your only choice, because your free will was given you for your joy in creating the perfect. All fear is ultimately reducible to the basic misperception that you have the ability to usurp the power of God. Of course, you neither can nor have been able to do this. Here is the real basis for your escape from fear. The escape is brought about by your acceptance of the atonement, which enables you to realize that your errors never really occurred. Only after the deep sleep fell upon Adam could he experience nightmares. If a light is suddenly turned on while someone is dreaming a fearful dream, he may initially interpret the light itself as part of his dream and be afraid of it. However, when he awakens, the light is correctly perceived as the release from the dream, which is then no longer accorded reality. This release does not depend on illusions. The knowledge that illuminates not only sets you free, but also shows you clearly that you are free. Whatever lies you may believe are of no concern to the miracle, which can heal any of them with equal ease. It makes no distinctions among misperceptions. Its sole concern is to distinguish between truth on the one hand and error on the other. Some miracles may seem to be of greater magnitude than others, but remember the first principle in this course. There is no order of difficulty in miracles. In reality, you are perfectly unaffected by all expressions of lack of love. These can be from yourself and others, from yourself to others, or from others to you. Peace is an attribute in you. You cannot find it outside. Illness is some form of external searching. Health is inner peace. It enables you to remain unshaken by lack of love from without and capable, through your acceptance of miracles, of correcting the conditions proceeding from lack of love in others. So there's a lot going on in this section. And what I believe is one of the foundations of it is this whole, I guess, envisioning of the Garden of Eden. And that this is something that one of the aspects of this that I enjoy is typically we're told or we have been trained to think of the Garden of Eden as a literal place with literal events going on. But here we're shown a different picture. We're told to consider the Garden of Eden as a state of mind, a pre-separation condition, a state of mind in which nothing was needed. And I think that's a really interesting viewpoint, because it seems like, I think we're all seekers of truth, and there's this New Age community which likes to think of biblical narration as stories. And then there's the seekers of truth who are very biblically oriented, who tend to take it verbatim, tend to think as literal stories and literal events and peoples and figures. And I think regardless, the question we should be asking ourselves is, what is this for? What are these stories trying to tell us? What is this text trying to tell us? And I don't think we can answer either way, if these were actual events or if they're narratives. But when we think of the Garden of Eden as a state of mind, that gives us a tool to work with. That gives us a tool of thought where we can take away from this this scripture, this story, something that helps us in our lives rather than it being a debate point for people. I'm wondering what you guys think about seeing the Garden of Eden as a state of mind.
Well, I think I have always considered myself a bit fortunate, when we talk about literal interpretations of of Bible stories, or I have always thought, well, it's a good thing I was, born and raised Catholic, and we never had that, emphasis on the Bible. First of all, at least in those days, there weren't, we never even had like Bible study or anything like that. So I never, had that kind of, religious upbringing where you believed all these stories in the Bible and took whatever was, was said literally. But it's even understanding it, or as an adult, many years later, understanding all the stories in the Bible as, myths or stories that we could still learn from, or, develop some kind of meaning or understanding. It's what I found interesting here in this section was how it related to the section that you talked about last week, which I'm sorry I missed, but just that whole, the separation and the fall. And so this section again, followed up on that as, the Garden of Eden as a symbol for the fall, or that's how I think most of us as Christians would have heard of it or learned of it in whatever religious practice people have. But to me, when I first started reading this section for today, what I found interesting was the whole idea of extension, of extending, because that really reminded me of the M. Scott Peck book, The Road Less Traveled, from the 70s, which would be way before your time, Timothy, but
Right at the same time as Course in Miracles, so.
Right. But just that idea of love, and the meaning of love being an extension of ourselves, that I think that's that always stayed in my mind, that definition of love as an extension of ourselves in whatever relationship there is there. It's anytime you extend yourself for someone else, and that is an expression of love. And so this in this section, that reminded me of that, when it started out, and extending as an aspect of God, which of course would be an aspect of love, that extending. But then it also later on, I guess further down in the section too, it brings that in again. So I don't know if any of you had, if that meant anything to you in a different way.
Yeah, I will say that extension, we must extend. Even when we think we're projecting, we're extending. And, one of the concepts that's repeated time and time again is that thoughts do not leave their source. And when we think something, if sometimes we think something about somebody else and we're thinking this negative thing that we don't want to associate with ourselves, so we pin it on somebody else and we think that we've gotten rid of it. But that's it doesn't leave us, that thought. It's part of us.
Right, right.
So that's why, you know, seeing our brother as ourself, as our salvation is through our brother, is that is why. And I love, I don't know if anybody here knows what brain cells look like, neurons. They're essentially these, like a typical cell is like a kind of a sphere, but brain cells have these arms that reach off of them and branch and connect with other neurons. And I just think it's so fitting, it's so perfect that that's the physical representation, the embodiment of thought, are these cells that extend outwards, because that every time we have a thought, we're extending ourselves outwards. And when we project, we think that we're sending something off and getting rid of it, but we're extending, always extending. So every thought that we have is just extension of ourselves. So I'm
And I
glad.
guess that's where I was a little, I guess I didn't read that sentence correctly, because I wasn't understanding initially the inappropriate use of extension or projection. And so I guess what it means then, I thought it was saying that extension, my thought, like it was saying extension or projection were the same thing. But I guess what it's saying, the inappropriate use of extension is projection, right? Or not?
Yes. So there's there's this continuous paradigm, budding of two paradigms in A Course in Miracles, truth and illusion. And A Course in Miracles brings them together so that you see truth for what it is. If when you separate them, then that's when things become to get obscured and you could possibly see value in illusion. But when they're brought together, the illusion just disappears and you're left with truth. So another one of those is ego, Holy Spirit, or ego, Christ, you know, true self. When they're brought together, ego vanishes because we see the true self.
So,
Extension,
go ahead,
projection.
sorry.
All I was going to say was extension and projection, same thing. They're really the same. When we bring them together, we see that we're just left with extension. Projection is that illusion aspect of it.
So can you extend something that isn't true?
Well, that's a good question.
I mean, because I'm trying to read all these sentences and I'm listening to what Paula said and then what you just said, and then I'm reading it again. And it's almost like I see a couple different things here, like extension. One thing that I get from it is that extension cannot be inappropriately used because everything is extension. And then it flat out says that it can be inappropriately used.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm unclear about what is being said here. But my mind is pretty full anyway, so I might just not be getting it.
No, that's a good point, and I guess I never thought of it that way. But I believe what we can extend is the belief in untruth. So I believe we are extending all the time. Everything, just like in our brains, we can form these neural pathways that no longer serve us, that reinforce, you know, bad behaviors that no longer serve us, that sort of thing. We can reinforce that every time we think it. What we can extend, perhaps, is the belief in lack, the belief in illusion. I don't think that necessarily makes it real. I think it just extends that belief outwards, if that makes any sense.
Right, so I'm looking at number 2. In the creation, God extended himself to his creations and imbued them with the same loving will to create. So are we then saying that extension is creation? And that inappropriate use of extension is creating illusion?
Very good question. I don't think we can. Well, illusion holds no reality. So I wonder what the visual is for projection.
Mm-hmm.
Because really, it says it in the seventh sentence, the inappropriate use of extension or projection occurs when you believe that some emptiness or lack exists in you,
Mm-hmm.
and that you can fill it with your own ideas instead of truth.
All
So,
right. Well, then I would say that projection. Well, yeah, you go ahead.
you got me.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a bit confusing.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like, the ego, and it's like, certainly we at least believe it exists, but we're told in A Course in Miracles that it holds no reality, which
Mm-hmm.
seems to make no sense, because it's like the book is not here, but I'm holding it, So I wonder, projection occurs when we believe that lack exists and that we can fill it with something other than truth.
Tim, how would you define extension? If we're always extending, well, what does that mean, really?
Perhaps, okay, so another line in A Course in Miracles is when you think you are unwilling to will with God, you're not thinking anything. There's no creation going on. So in other words, there's either creation or there's stagnation. There's active creation. There's this creation with God, and then there's not. There's just delay in time, essentially. So maybe that's what projection is this delay, choosing not to extend, choosing to really what we're doing is focusing on lack when we're projecting. So we're not creating.
Would you call that the dream state that this section also refers to, in saying that there's no biblical reference to Adam ever waking up?
It's a pretty cool passage, isn't it?
Isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
I know.
I don't have my Bible with me, but when in the book of Genesis, I think it's the second chapter. It's like, a few pages into the Bible, that's when Adam falls asleep, and then the rest of it is just Adam's nightmare.
Yeah. The full projection, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, come on, even Rip Van Winkle woke up.
I wonder, I really wonder if this is, we live in such a beautiful time where we're, able to, first of all, channel these messages like this. Like, there are many books like this that are channeled and so accessible to us, and that we can discuss this without, fear of getting arrested or killed, or burning the books.
Or burning us.
Burning us. Yeah, exactly. And so, I mean, it references that there hasn't been any real awakening in our humanity, but I really wonder if this is if we're in the midst of this awakening.
I think
that's
so.
What the shift is. Yeah.
Yeah. When I read this, I thought this could be the time. This could be happening now.
It's such an exciting time.
It feels that way at times.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess it's kind of like, juxtaposition of truth and illusion, where we have this tremendous awakening going on, but I guess while it's happening, we see the opposite side of that all the weird
Mm.
things that are happening, you know, that
Mhm.
are not aligned with that. And I guess it's
Yes.
just kind of to shine that away, perhaps.
There just seem to be so many things, so many different and, you know, complex ideas in this one section. But at the end, at the very end, it just seems like some of these things were just are to me felt like they were just thrown in with no relation to anything, you know,
So,
like
what may,
illness is some form of external searching. And I thought, what? Well, you know, where did illness come from, you know,
yeah,
and health is inner peace, you know, so those two things, you know, made sense together, but it it just didn't seem to relate to anything, you know, in the rest of the
yeah.
set.
Well, those two sentences are awesome to know, but they're very true, but they are thrown in there. It helps to note that uh, a lot of chapter 1 and 2, uh, and maybe 3, are highly edited because when Helen Schuckman, she was the scribe who wrote this,
Mm-hmm.
when she started receiving this, I mean, you could imagine what she was thinking. She thought she was going crazy.
Mm-hmm.
She
Yeah.
would describe herself as atheist, and she was in a very competitive educational environment.
Mm-hmm.
And essentially, her, I guess the head of her department one day was fed up at the very competitive and bitter atmosphere in their work environment, and he just had a and launched a tirade one day and said there must be a better way. Whatever we're doing is not working. Nobody was happy, and what are they doing if they're just competing with each other for unhappiness? And he said there must be a better way. And Helen Schuckman, who scribed this,
Mm-hmm.
agreed and said, I agree with you. Let's find that better way. And so after that, for a few months, she started to receive highly symbolic dreams, and she shared them with William. William Thetford is the his name, and he suggested to her that she should write some of these dreams down. So she started to write down these dreams. One of the dreams that uh, I believe is notably awesome is she was in a cave. She was atheist, but she was intrigued by Christianity. So she would kind of, pursue Christianity, then get fed up with it and be atheist and so forth. She loved the Dead Sea Scrolls, which were these scrolls that were found in a cave somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
One of her dreams, she was in a cave and a scroll opened up and it said, God is. And she knew in her mind that she could open the left part of the scroll and see all of the past history, everything that happened in the past. She would see what happens. She could unveil the right part of it and see all that would happen in the future. But she knew that that was unimportant because God is. So she chose to not go either left or right. She just chose to be centered. And I guess that was kind of a launching point into writing A Course in Miracles, because she started to write down that dream as a dream journal. And eventually, she started getting inner dictation, which eventually said, "This is A Course in Miracles. Please take notes." so, um, so she thought she was going crazy and haywire. She would bring these notes to William to type up the next day. And both of them are saying, this is incredible, but where is this coming from? So anyway, a lot of this beginning portion of the text had very personal references to Helen and William, things that they were going through. It was giving them guidance. It was telling them how they should more properly perceive their coworkers, what they should be doing with their friends. And so it helped them to confirm that this was something spectacular and something that was greater than themselves. But they felt it was not proper to include that in this published edition of the text. So that is why chapter 1 starts off essentially as a bulleted list of principles of miracles. That is why in chapter 2 we get this out of left field illness is some form of external searching, because they chose to edit out this content, which sometimes was sizable. It was sometimes pages of material that they chopped out and continued later on. So chapter 2 is somewhat edited, but once we get into the later chapters, it's just, it reads like poetry.
Yeah. No, I had, I guess I've been reading the course since 2003. And what always amazes me is that every time I read it, you know, it's like I'm reading it for the first time. First of all, I don't have a photographic memory. So even each time, and it's so dense, but each time I read it, I read something else that, you know, strikes me that I hadn't ever thought about or, you know, considered in the previous readings. But,
Absolutely. Have you ever, have you read this, have you stick to the same edition, Paula?
yes.
And it's
Yes,
the Foundation for Inner
I
Peace?
have the same book. It's just like worn like many people's Bible.
I would, if you are intrigued, or if you ever feel so inclined, there's another edition called the Foundation, or rather, the Circle of Atonement edition. And it's essentially a reworkings of the text, so that the first couple of chapters, it includes all the personal content, and you get a better sense for
Yeah.
a lot of this beginning material.
Yeah, I need to look at that. I know that online I had seen another version which was like I forget.
Is it the Ur text?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
the same concept. Yeah,
But
that
what did you call the other one? What did you call the
so there's essentially a professionally, a very well done
draft or
no, it's a final version, and I'd say it's truer to the original material, and it's called the Circle of Atonement edition. I'll type it in the
okay.
chat. And it's thick. It's even thicker than this. It's like a tome. But he includes notes, and he, you know, has
Yeah, that
footnotes.
would be interesting. That would be interesting to read.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd just like to comment. Am I audible? Or
Yes.
on this is a personal experience. When we get to item 5, verse 8, peace is an attribute in you. Vis-a-vis what you were saying, Timothy, about this personal aspect of A Course in Miracles that was taken out. I'm just assuming in my mind that after you said again, this idea of peace was something they were searching for. Obviously, that was a big part of, we need peace in this office. Let's just find out how to do it. So then verse 9 says, you cannot find it outside. And the Course in Miracles and a lot of these, the paths to enlightenment are about, like, don't look on the outside. Illness enables you to, illness is some form of external searching. Now, when I was diagnosed with cancer 10 years ago, I was in many support groups and people were discussing, you know, various ways of treating this. And it was a lot of external searching. Look, go to this doctor, oh, I know a better doctor, and there's this drug and that drug, and you can go on these trials and blah, blah, blah. And so, but we were also doing A Course in Miracles at that time. And there was an opportunity to look inside. And one of the things that I did was I did not go the traditional route. I went inside and I trusted. And so I didn't have any chemo. I didn't have any chemical things. So the whole thing about, and doing that,
it says health is inner peace, but I used to switch the phrases around when we were studying A Course in Miracles. I would say inner peace is health.
Yeah.
So I think this whole thing about peace and health is a big thing for me. So that little piece there has so much in it. And I believe it did jump into the discussion that they were probably having in the university about what was going on there. Anyway, I just wanted to put that in.
Absolutely. Thank you. And it's true. The scribes were coming from this place of intense external searching and wondering why it wasn't working. So, yeah. Karen, I was wondering what you think about this. I know you like the words play that sometimes it uses. In paragraph 2, the last sentence says, this requires God's endowment of the Son with free will because all loving creation is freely given in one continuous line in which all aspects are of the same order. What do you think that one continuous line means? All living creation is freely given in one continuous line.
That's interesting, isn't it? Because usually when I think about line, I think about part of the illusion.
Yeah.
Like a timeline, which is for our benefit, but doesn't really exist. Freely given in one continuous line. Well, what my mind is wanting to create an image of like a flow of energy. So rather than a dot, you know, my heart knows what I mean.
All loving creation.
Now, sometimes like I'll think of things in terms of energy streams.
Yeah.
You know, like Reiki, there are lots of systems and schools of thought and traditions and all of that. But there's, in my thinking, there's a Reiki, and there is a Reiki energy stream that anybody who's focused on Reiki their energy is a part of that stream, right? So when I think of stream, it's almost like a continuous line rather than a point.
Oh, okay.
So that's all I can think of here. Loving creation given, like given in a line, that's almost paradoxical to me.
This reminds me of something I tried. I worked for a very competitive global consulting firm. So this idea of one continuous line, that wasn't the thought that I got, but what I got, and this was long before I looked at the Course in Miracles, what I got, but I had been going to Findhorn, so I was opening up, that I didn't share this with my colleagues, accountants and lawyers, but I realized that we all, you know, I wouldn't have used this term then, but we were all part of this one mind. And to me, that was a continuous line. And what I wanted for our team, we were in the manufacturing practice and we were talking a lot about environmental stuff and alternative energy and so on. And it's a fantastic opportunity because I know that each one of us has something there. So in trying to identify what everybody's part was through sort of an organic process, I actually had a PhD candidate from the University of Toronto come in, and he was working on this kind of stuff. He was studying the Psalms, and he was studying the one mind thing. And I said, don't scare them too much, but if you can just help us get this whole idea of the oneness, like the continuous line, we could do amazing things in this practice. We can take it globally and all the rest of it. So that's what I was thinking at the time. That I'm thinking now, I probably was thinking of this one continuous line. So it has no beginning and it has no end. It's like the alpha and the omega. So it's just going like this all the time. And it's also like the things that tie the brain together, you know, these, what's my vocabulary, but, you know, the Timothy, you just talked about the connectors. This is one continuous line. And so anyway, that was my 2 cents worth of what, you know, my experience with this. And that's what brought me back to the process at work. But unfortunately, I mean, I don't know, maybe some seeds were planted, because after I left Deloitte, I saw some amazing things happen. They didn't seem to get it, but as I say, maybe the seeds were planted. And they've changed a lot. I mean, they have a big yoga studio. One whole floor of the building is a yoga studio.
Nice.
Got meditation rooms.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that was my 2 cents on that.
It's interesting. I didn't consider thinking about the line as a circle, like you were illustrating, which is also an interesting point. And I don't know if you
How
know
did you
Karen,
take it, Tom?
but Karen actually has some roots at Findhorn, is it?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was at Findhorn in 1970 or 1983. I mean, that's when the meditation room was a hut. Like a yurt, a small yurt.
89, they were starting to build the alternative housing. That's when I first went there. I went there to get an answer to something major, and I got it. Shook up my whole world.
Hi, Shabana. It's nice to see you. Oh, I went away again.
I was trying to unmute myself. What you just said about the circle is very, very interesting, because the idea is unity, and the circle encompasses everything. It just goes round and round. But there's also, I was born Muslim, but I believe everything. I mean, I enjoy all the scriptures like novels. They're fascinating.
Right.
So and I also follow Sufi path. Are you familiar with Sufism?
Oh yeah. Oh,
Yeah, okay.
Very
So
basically.
yeah, there the idea is essentially this, that the heart is where we need to travel, and we just go deeper within, because essentially this kingdom of heaven is within us. And so for me, the only peace comes from alignment at the core of my being.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. Have you ever heard of the text called A Course of Love, Shabana?
No, I haven't. Who is it by?
It's I'm not sure her name, but it's essentially an extension of A Course in Miracles. If you're familiar with A Course in Miracles, this
Yes.
A Course of Love was written, I'd say, 10 years ago by Perry, I think her name is Perrin, Mary Perrin, something like that. I think.
I could look it up.
Love, and I believe that her last name is Perrin. But it essentially, where A Course in Miracles is very mind-oriented and getting us to retrain our mind and our thinking, A Course of Love is directed at heart, and just from that being state, that feeling state. So it's not so much analytical as it is, heartful.
Yes, that's my basic trouble with A Course in Miracles. I've been basic, I mean, I've been looking at it for at least 20 years and been at a loss because it's so
Dense.
far from, well, no, it's not just, well, yeah, it is dense for sure. It's like a brick, but but I've never joined a group, a discussion group like this one. So I am absolutely fascinated by Terry's recitation of peace is health and how your cancer went. That is absolutely remarkable. Thank you for sharing that, Terry.
The man who taught me this won the Order of Ontario, and he's written a book on these key people who followed that path. And some of them had stage 4 cancer. I had stage 2, and mine was gone within a few months. But I also did juicing, really serious juicing. So I attended many of his lectures that were given at a hospital here, cancer hospital. And his work is online. I'll send you the link, Timothy, but I was just reviewing some of the stuff yesterday, and I didn't even think about this, but this is the circle. This is in his book, this circle. The circle?
Yeah, nice.
Everything, so many synchronicities. So he's got a divine mind, and he had stage 4 cancer himself. That's how he got into this. And he has his doctorate in this. So got the divine mind, and then this little bit here, a dotted thing, our true mind, and the ego's in the middle, which is a separate I. So anyway, I mean, I'm not going to get that right away, but so it's really interesting to review his work. He actually started with Eckhart Tolle's book, and then he took us into A Course in Miracles.
Awesome.
So what's his name, Terry?
Alistair Cunningham.
Yes.
Cunningham. And I would call him a mystic. I don't like to label people, but Alistair J. Cunningham.
Yes.
And he is a he has a PhD, and he is a psychologist. And I went through the healing journey, so he's got all the material for the healing journey is online, and it's all free.
The Healing Journey is the name of
his program. Yeah, a healing journey.
A Healing Journey. Okay.
Yeah, a healing journey. The healing journey. I can't remember, and he still gives it. I mean, when I started taking it, I thought, oh my God, it should be mainstream. Everybody should know about this. It was amazing. I mean, the transformation, the things that were happening within the room. Right on in real time, people were being transformed. We were carrying stuff for so long, and the art he had us do. Actually, I shouldn't take up too much time. This tree that we did, of all the stuff we believed and all the stuff we believed that we knew we could do, one by one in my life, it all started going to the other side of the tree, just because we did this. And I've done that with children. When someone was talking about, I was raised in a Roman Catholic family and attended a Roman Catholic school. And I am a Sunday school teacher, but I'm now in the Anglican Church. But what I do is, and what I have come to believe is that telling the children the stories of, the Nativity and the Adam and Eve. This is like spirituality 101. And I do plays with the children, so they embody it. They get it at the body level, even although it's not real, and I know it's not real. So later on, when I'm in Bible study, I talk about that. This is what I do with the children, but this is where they get it. This is where they take it in at the body level. And so we're taking it at another level. So that's my 2 cents on the and yeah.
Yeah, I love how you say you were told to write down all your beliefs on the board. I think that's something that very few people, very seldom will do, to actually consider our beliefs, what we hold as true, what are the foundations of our thought system. Because a lot of it is just not true. A lot of it is not only not true, it doesn't serve us. And that's why I love A Course in Miracles, because it forces us to really essentially write down our beliefs and then inspect every one of them, and all of the things that are not true we can see through.
Mhm.
But it takes sometimes, I mean, it says, you know, an upside down perspective looks right side up when you're in the perspective. So of course Miracles flips it upside down, but really it's turning it right side up. And getting to the fundamental, our beliefs, and that's what shapes our subconscious, shapes our conscious thought, is our beliefs, what we hold true, because that's something that we're not conscious of on a moment to moment basis. We're not, unless we're reading A Course in Miracles, we're not considering what is true and what is not in each scenario. But
Yeah.
when we are able to inspect it and fully sit with and come to a agreement as to what is true, not based on what society has told us, not based on our upbringing or our perception of our experiences, but just based on reason and what feels good, then we can use that as a foundation for approaching these day-to-day events. And we don't have to, we're coming from this truth place rather than our cornerstone of our thought system just being, you know, some sand. We're using that rock of
Mhm.
truth as our foundation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, it would be an interesting process if after a thought or a statement, we went into like a freeze where we could examine it right then,
Yeah.
right?
Right?
Right? Stop frame,
Yeah.
take a peek. Yeah, because there are so many thoughts and statements that go by before we catch one
Mhm.
and take a look at it, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And really it's our duty to be vigilant for those thoughts and to pick them out and address them. And if we say something to somebody that is not complete or is the opposite of what we want to be, to actively fix it.
Mhm.
Or else we're just reinforcing that old framework that's causing the lights to go and the water to spew all over the place in our house, in our mental
Yeah.
house.
It's our duty. You know, I was just proofreading the Frontier, and there's a bullet point in there somewhere from Neil Donald Walsh that I have to paraphrase it because I don't remember what it is, but it has to do with how you can just immediately change a thought. Like if you have a thought and you recognize it somehow as an error, right? You immediately change it. So I wanted to stop what I was doing and go find something that I could listen to on that because I mean that is what it's about, is changing those as soon as we can, as soon as we have the awareness of them and could just take that, just stretch it out a little bit so we have a second to do something about it.
That was the basis of a lot of Louise Hay's work. And what she would say, she'd often use, she said, she would, if that thought came in, she said, just immediately imagine a beautiful bunch of roses, yellow roses. Just keep that beautiful bunch of yellow roses. I have a balcony and I live practically in a forest. I live in a Carolinian forest. So I just go out and say, okay, no, I'm not accepting this. I'm not accepting this.
Yeah. And
your life depends on it. With these people who had cancer, believe me, you get serious about these thoughts.
Absolutely. Well, we all depend on it, you know. And every moment, our whole experience is shaped by these seemingly little thoughts that,
Yeah.
you know, even you know, judgmental thoughts. If we're
Right, right.
seeing somebody and being judgmental in our head. But what I love A Course in Miracles has showed me is that's just a mirror. It really showed me that that's just a mirror of what we see as ourselves, and it's just true. And so when we're making a judgment or labeling somebody or saying, "Oh, this person is such and such," we're saying that about ourselves. And I've heard that sentiment before, but A Course in Miracles really shows it, shows how it's true.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just so easy when knowing that to catch those little judgmental things that sometimes would have passed through, or sometimes we fall for the bait and pursue it down that rabbit hole, but but to catch it as soon as possible, because that's when we can reverse it, or
Yeah.
just nick it, you know, then and there.
So I don't even know if it would be, I haven't thought about this. This is just rising up. I don't know if it would even be possible to analyze anything without bringing judgment into it. You know, like for instance, I'm in my world and there's somebody saying something and I think, well, that's judgmental. What that person said, well, that's judgmental. And then it's important to recognize that I just judged that. Right.
Yeah.
And that's why I'm saying I don't even know if there's a separation between was just analyzing, just looking, you know, analyzing what they said and judging it. Can you even have any thought about anything that's going on without adding a judgment to it? Right? It's a human trait. We do it a lot. I don't know if we ever don't do it.
Well, when we're just simply here,
Yes,
and there's not then that's not present.
that's right. That's not present. Yeah. And all the rest of the time, at least for Karen Gordon, it is present. Very present.
Ego, yes.
Yes.
The ego, Karen Gordon, perhaps, but
Yeah,
not
that girl. Yeah.
not the child of God
No,
behind.
no, not that. Huh. Oh,
And
it's so tiring.
yeah,
I was playing with the idea of, for some time, of judgment versus observation. Now, I could maybe get myself off the hook by saying that these are observations.
I don't know, Jerry.
I'm looking at that judgment. Okay, yeah, I know I judge all the time. And when we were doing A Course in Miracles with Alistair Cunningham, we could not believe how much we judged, all of us. It really woke us up to how much we were judging.
Yeah.
Second, think, okay, I'm not accepting that, or seeing a beautiful view, or starting something physical like drawing. We always would move and get out of it.
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, language has really gotten in our labeling. The labeling of things has really gotten in our way of being, right? That doesn't necessarily have to do with judgment per se, but you know, I look out the window and there's a lot going on out there. And if I start to identify it as trees, sky, clouds, birds, wild turkeys, then as soon as I do that, it removes me, right? And the being, it's almost like it doesn't require, for sure, it doesn't require labels. Yeah. Wild turkeys are fun, by the way.
Something just occurred to me while we were speaking about this is I've heard people saying they're living the dream. And I think suddenly now, upon reflection, that they're fast asleep.
yeah, it's true.
Because
Living the
otherwise,
dream.
That's a good thing. Yeah.
That's really funny, Siobhan.
Well, that's the paradox. You see, like I used to scratch my head before, is how could that be a dream, right? I mean, the mess they're in. But now I see is that, what they're saying is, let me sleep some more because I just haven't got the nerve to wake up.
It's true.
That's an interesting way of saying it.
and with Steve Farrell, with Humanity's Team, always speaks about the American dream and how illusory it is and how, there's no substance to it. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's a dream. And it's along the same lines. It's not reality. It's still a dream.
Yeah, but that's what I don't think we have to single out the American dream. It's worldwide, based on conspicuous consumption and wealth and status and power and bullying. That's the dream. And I just look at Donald J. Trump and think, my goodness, doesn't he deserve a whole lot of love?
Amen. Which I never say, by the way. But I just did. Yep. I mean, that is the antidote. Not anecdote, antidote, right, Shabana?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Well, going back to, yes, I totally agree with you, Karen, but while we're talking about, Tim started by mentioning what brain cells look like. And all I can think of is my hands, my fingers meshing, because the future of our planet is community and sharing and togetherness, that we truly are one. And I feel, I'm Canadian, I'm Pakistani, but I'm living in Canada for the past 900 years. So the whole idea is to see white blood cells, like the just coming around a virus or bacterium, that they just encircle it and dissolve it, which is the solution, according to Karen, is we have the power to throw so much love at it that it becomes one.
Yeah, and I think what I meant, actually, to clarify, when I said it's the antidote, I wasn't referring to President Trump. I was referring to our error in thinking. I was referring to our judgment, actually. Love is the antidote to that. Yeah.
Our error in seeing it as
a problem.
Exactly. And it's important to note that love, light, is not competing with darkness. It's not a battle. It's not a struggle. Light just shines it away. Light shines light that there is no darkness. The absence of darkness, when in the absence of light, when light is put in, is light. There's no competition. There's no battle. There's no fight.
And maybe for a discussion another time, there was one passage that you read earlier about sometimes when we're deep in the dream and we see light, we think it's part of the nightmare. I can't remember what it said. That was very interesting to me. I'm going to reflect upon that one.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
What does the book say, or what have you found in terms of, say, I think we did this at Princess Margaret Hospital, loving something like judgment, saying, judgment, I love you, you're okay, don't worry, everything. You're talking to judgment.
Yeah. Ho'oponopono is nice. Yeah, Ho'oponopono is a great practice. But I
Yeah.
will say that A Course in Miracles would essentially, I'm not sure what chapter, but eventually it gets into what it calls ego dynamics. Essentially, what the ego shining, bringing this lantern down into the twisting passageways of the ego's thought system, through the corridors and the dark walls, and bringing our light through this journey within. And essentially, it comes to this statement where the realization where the ego is nothing, and it doesn't deserve our love. It doesn't deserve our attention, because that's giving existence to it. So it's not loving it away as much as seeing through it, I'd say.
Interesting. Yeah. Wow. Ooh, there's a lot of content here to
I know this is
mull over and integrate.
Yes.
Ooh-wee.
chapter 2 starts to get into some stuff. So to be honest, I thought the next week's section was going to be the next section.
No. Yeah.
but we will have to continue this next week. I'm very appreciative of everybody here for allowing each of us to strengthen our foundation of truth and to share our perspectives, because really one perspective on its own doesn't mean anything. And each one of ours, I think, has gotten a bit firmer in our understanding of ourselves through this. So thank you. And I guess we're doing one email reminder, so I'll send out some reminder at some point next week as to what we're discussing, and you can pick it up from there.
Well, thank you, Tim. It's good to see everybody.
Thanks so much. See
Thank
y'all
you.
next week.
Thank you, Paula,
Thank you.
Mary, and thank you, Shabana.
Thank you.
Very
Bye-bye.
nice to spend this time with you guys.
Yeah, really good.
God bless.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.